At the party, Irma complains of terrible pains in her throat and stomach. Freud scolds her for quitting therapy and proceeds to examine her throat. He discovers a peculiar growth on the walls of her mouth and calls upon a colleague for a second opinion. In the dream, Freud realizes that the cause of Irma's suffering was a careless injection given by Otto. He had neglected to use a clean needle. Freud's dream struck him as terribly revealing. The dream was an act of revenge against Otto for maligning Freud's ability, against Irma for resisting his analysis. He proposed a general law. The dream is a wish fulfillment. It was this revelation that inspired Freud to write The Interpretation of Dreams. The book was published in 1899, but Freud requested that the publication date be given as 1900 to create the impression that his views were pioneering thoughts for the new century. Freud's epic was ignored by disapproving colleagues and seemed only eccentric food for a handful of readers. The book sold merely 350 copies in its first 6 years. Freud was characteristically defensive.
I had dared, against the objections of severe science, to take the part of the ancients and of superstition.
In the book, Freud notes that amid the kaleidoscope of unique dreams are a handful that occur to almost all dreamers. Dreams of falling, being chased, soaring through the air, and failing exams are common to the human experience.
I come from Austria, and we have some nice ideas about love. The biggest thing what you can do for a girlfriend is to pick up an Edelweiss by yourself. And so last night I dreamed I climbed up to the mountain over the rocks and I find the Edelweiss. When I found it and I tried to get it, broke the stone under my feet. So I fall, down, down, down. At the very end, alarm. I waked up. I look at my hand. The finger was still together, but no Edelweiss. It was a dream.
Freud's interpretation of the meaning of dreams was based on his larger view of human nature. He saw us as basically selfish animals driven by aggressive urges and the desire for pleasure. We learn how to repress our animal impulses as we grow up in order to get along in society, but we never totally conquer our primitive selves. This animal self, which contains the core of the psyche, Freud called the id. The ego and the superego are later developments that arise from the need to survive and adapt to the surrounding social environment. The ego is our rational self. The superego represents societal pressures and tells us what is right and wrong. The superego is frequently in conflict with the id. Freud saw the psyche as a battleground, with the various personality components engaged in ongoing struggle. Feelings are being repressed if the ego or superego become too dominant over the id. To Freud, emotion unexpressed often led to problems.
What Freud says in the interpretation of dreams, in saying that every dream is the fulfillment of a disguised wish, is that our meanings are disguised, that we don't know for sure what things are significant. But we need to find ways of discovering how they may be related to our desires, how what we do unconsciously, without thinking, may be related to our fundamental desires, maybe even expressing those fundamental desires without our being aware of it. Once one opens that question, it's not up to then some scientist or philosopher to come on and say, they don't really mean anything. No, the issue is then, how are we going to make sense of things, events, words, activities that we used to not bother about? And now we decide, yes, I'm going to bother about that. I'm going to try to see what that means about my life or about my friend's life or about our relationship. And psychoanalysis in Freud's hands opened up that question.
In the interpretation of dreams, Freud laid out a formula which could make sense of even the most confusing dream. His theory relies on a part of the mind he called the censor, which edits our dreams. If we dreamed about the literal fulfillment of desire, he said, the powerful emotions this would create would wake us. The censor transforms the dream content to disguise its true meaning. Freud called this transformation of desire dream work. It is composed of a number of processes. Displacement shifts emotion from one idea to another. Condensation fuses together multiple thoughts into a single symbol. Along with symbolization and projection, dreamwork components join together to change and redirect dream thoughts and images into acceptable forms. After the censor has completed its dream work, the ego reorganizes the otherwise bizarre components of the dream so that it has an apparent meaning called the manifest dream. The process of dream interpretation involves decoding the manifest dream content to discover the real hidden meaning of the dream called the latent dream. Freud insisted that dream life is as important as real life. Stripped to bare essentials, a dream unanalyzed was to Freud an unopened letter. In every dream, there is always another story. There is more than meets the eye. In 1977, director Robert Altman found artistic inspiration and a solution to a problem in his dreams. The film he had been preparing to direct was canceled. His wife was ill, and he needed a new project.
I dreamed a title, 3 women. I dreamed that Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek were in it, and I knew it was kind of what the genre of it was. And so I woke up and I took the pad next to my bed and I wrote down my notes about that, and I went back to sleep. And then I dreamed more about the thing, and I saw this place in the desert, kind of a bar and a shack. And I woke up and I wrote down some notes, and I went back to sleep. And then I called my production manager, and I said, go out in the desert and look for this kind of place, et cetera, et cetera. And I made some notes, and I went back to sleep. And I woke up.
There were no notes or notepad next to Robert Altman's bed. It had all been a dream. But it was one that came true. 3 Women was contracted to be made 11 days later.
What's that? Oh, that's just Willie. She paints those weird things all over the place.
3 Women, it has a dream-like quality to it. This problem that I had, I solved within the confines of my own mind, but when I was asleep. So I've just learned through the years, practiced, trusting, not necessarily what I dream, but that I will dream. And perhaps an answer to whatever the problem is will come out of that.
I can talk about a dream that I had 47 years ago, which is as vivid in my mind as it was when it happened, and changed my entire life. I dreamed I was lying in a field, a beautiful field of flowers, with my baby, and suddenly there appeared a black monster or horse, a bête noire, which is a black beast in French, and this beast was trying to trample us and to kill us and to ruin us. And I realized Noir is also Schwarz in German, and I was married to a man, the father of my child, by the name of Schwarz. And I